now that I'm actually here.
And we're live. Hello, everybody at the What's on the Elephant and Castle Facebook community. I am Nick from Retribe, and joining me today is Andrew Wainstein, who is a creative entrepreneur, the man who's responsible for basketball, in Europe since 1991, and the founder of Campfire, which is an amazingly cool project that I'm really looking forward to talking to you more about, Andrew. And you're also just an all-around super cool guy who I've known for a little bit of time now, and I'm really grateful you could join us today. Can you introduce yourself to the community, please?
Yeah, really pleased to be here. Thank you for having me, Nick. As Nick sort of touched on, oops, get rid of that. As Nick touched on, I started the fantasy football thing back in 1991. It was a sort of a startup at a really feels like a prehistoric stage, because we actually started the game by post, and then it was in newspapers, and then eventually sort of mid-90s we found our way online, and which just gave us a whole new breath of fresh air. But basically I've been involved with fantasy league since 91. It's very much has been my baby, and I've been on a journey with it. It's been very successful. It's also had some major challenges, and I suppose I've learned a lot about business and growth and leadership, teams, products, you name it, from this journey, all very much self-taught and no funding, almost on my own in terms of partners and things. And through that struggle, I think it's just, it's evolved me to where I am now. I'm still involved with the business. I've sort of slimmed it down to the bit that I feel is the really authentic and golden part of the business. Interested in doing that, but I feel like where I am now is other projects as well. I've been coaching for the last couple of years, typically around leadership, people in career transition, and I'm building this new venture called Campfire, which is, I don't know whether I'm enjoying or there's sort of equal levels of excitement and creativity and frustration, because I'm allowing it to evolve. And I have a good sense of what it is at its essence, but it's an evolving thing. And it's, the simple way of talking about it is it's bringing people together for conversations that get to what's important. So it's finding the groups and the context that really sort of, I guess, light people up. And I think that's going to be quite a range. And I'm starting to run some pilots, getting some collaborators. And it's coming more slowly than a lot of people might build it, but I think that feels just the way I need to do it right now. It's got to be quite a personal project, and it's got to be quite soulful. And I'm just about trusting that process on a good day. On a bad day, I'm thinking, what the hell is this? But I think that is part of the process. We all know that.
No, thank you so much for that. I identify with the last little bit about how Campfire is evolving, because I know, as someone who started a business a very long time ago too, I tend to want to fall back into those old ways of the structure and the order and the business plans and targets, and they just don't feel as authentic as actually just letting something grow organically. But there's also the pressures behind trying to have a startup nowadays, which we'll get into a little bit. But let's go back to the fantasy football that you started in back in the early 90s. How much of a football fan were you, or are you? And isn't it just so exciting about what happened in England with the Euros and the Lionesses on Sunday?
Yeah.
Are you buzzing from it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really good question. And I think there are, in a way, some links there. So to start, when I started, I was, hugely into football, maybe unhealthily so. To give you an example, I'm an Arsenal fan, and I remember seeing Fever Pitch, the Nick Hornby thing, which was about this really diehard fan and, slightly obsessive, slightly geeky, slightly, borderline insane fan, and watching it and thinking, he's quite dedicated. I wouldn't call him that, I thought sort of middle of the road sort of enthusiasm. So I was definitely sort of at that end of the spectrum or beyond. And I was into computers, so that sort of combined the two. And I think what I would say is the success of fantasy football has coincided with, as we all know, the commercialization of football since Italia 90, and also the increase in stats. And so for me as a football fan, fantasy football is a bit of a double-edged sword, because it slightly takes me away from that partisan, slightly one-eyed way of being a fan. And that's, I think, what's changed in the last 20, 30 years with football. People have become more informed. They know much more about players from other teams. The violence has come down because of that. So that's a good thing. But I think sort of, I don't know if there's some drop in passion, because it's a bit more head than heart. And coming to your point about the Lionesses, that feels like a more of a pure football. There's not the sort of the agents, the commercialization, the European Super League, how much is this contract worth? It's just around the joy of football and what's happening on the pitch. And I feel like you want to hold on to that as a football fan. And I think that fantasy football is a brilliant thing. Obviously, I love it, but I think at times it plays into that sort of data pundit thing, and you get away from being a fan and you become more of an expert. And I think that can suck some of the simple joy out of being a sports fan.
Oh, I know what you mean. There's almost that kind of armchair statistician. I know all the stats, so that means I know the essence of the sport. And I really like how you talk about how the Lionesses, when you watch it, it's like you're actually feeling the origins of the sport, the passion of the sport. And I think it's because they're there to win, but there's also the points to prove that they're just as entertaining. Bums on seats are just the same. The game is the same. There's not as much, like, apart from the fact that there's not as much. There's not as much diving. There seems to be a lot more like passion around the game. And I'm just so excited about what happened. I'm still buzzing from it. I was in Trafalgar Square before the game last week, and you could just feel the energy. And I'm really looking forward to what it's going to do for sport in the UK, and particularly, hopefully getting more exposure to young girls being able to play the game. So we have all of these, amazing things to look forward to. And I'm interested to know more about how you got the business side of things started. Where was the entrepreneur in you, as well as being a football fan? Oh, and I'm also glad you're an Arsenal fan, because so am I. I moved here.
We're having a bit of a fun time for a change.
Yeah.
It's been sort of 10 years of pain, I think, as an Arsenal fan. Or maybe 15 even. I think I was, I've heard these conversations about the different types of entrepreneurs, and there are some entrepreneurs who I think would just look very dispassionately at the market, see what's missing, execute, raise funds, exit at the optimum time. I know nobody gets it exactly right, but they're a little bit more. They're very good at executing, and they're very dispassionate, and they can see what's needed, and they're, I guess, agnostic to different fields and different sectors. They just go where the opportunity is, and I fully respect that. I'm not that person, and that wasn't my journey. I was an enthusiast, so I was maybe more like you could almost say you could say a creative entrepreneur, but you could also almost say an artisan. So I just wanted to build something that I thought was a great product and that I would really enjoy, and it tapped into my passion for designing a game, football, I guess serving an audience. And I was successful in, I guess, quite a naive way. Yes, I grew up, and I think I became very good, let's say, at being quite operational, making things work. But I think I maybe missed big opportunities to sell out or expand. But what I did manage to do was create something that was very stable, had good, solid progress, and actually had some great teams and some great people who've come back, years or decades later and saying it's still the best place I ever worked. So for me, that was worth more than anything else, and the loyalty of our audience playing the game. So, the financial bit was good. It was a 6 or 7 out of 10. It's been very good. It's been a very strong sort of income for me for years. But in terms of executing a business, being an entrepreneur with a capital E, I wouldn't put myself in that bracket. And there's elements where I feel a bit disappointed, like, oh, I could have done that. I could have sold. I could have done that. But you can only really be who you are. And I think it's about valuing the talents that you have as an entrepreneur. And I guess that the short answer to what I've just said is, I guess they come in all shapes and sizes and colors. And I think you've got to understand where what are your sort of superpowers as an entrepreneur, and where you are on this sort of spectrum between artist and let's say executor. And I think, I do think more and more in the last 5-10 years, if we're saying the artist is here and the executor is here, there's much more appetite and communities of the more creative and the guys who are sort of looking at enjoyment and quality and purpose more than just scale. I think that's become more of a metric.
I'm kind of interested to know if somebody who's listening to this who are a budding entrepreneur today in the gig economy, where you've come through, the .com, the idea that you use technology, it created a business for yourself. You wouldn't consider yourself that business oriented. It was more kind of, like you say, artisan and passion driven. Whereas what is it like today in the market to say that you're an entrepreneur? How much of it is about just setting up a business, working on it for 4 or 5 years, spinning it and selling out, and hopefully coming away with a little bit of money? Is it becoming more business and kind of buyout, or is there still the passion? Are there still the great ideas?
Well, I think there's some genius people doing amazing ideas, and there's the creativity and the scale combining. Maybe in to some extent in unicorns. Some unicorns are more creative than others, but I think it does. I think it really depends on the individual. But I think I suppose, I don't know if this is a good way of answering it. I wonder whether there's a culture around entrepreneurialism, if that's a word, which is, I need to be successful, I need to scale, because otherwise I'm not a proper entrepreneur. And whether there's enough of an outlet and a permission for people to say, you know what, I just want to do what I enjoy. I want to build maybe more of a lifestyle business. Lifestyle business in my mind is maybe more where I was, but it's a bit of a dirty word, I think, because first of all, you can't really raise investment for a lifestyle business. And second of all, what I think it's laced with is lack of ambition. Lifestyle business, oh, so you're not that ambitious then. And it's like, yeah, maybe not, but then maybe I'm looking at, being around when my kids grew up and having a rounded life and not becoming a machine at work. I don't know if that answers your question. So, in terms of culturally and where we are, I don't know. I mean, the people I work with, I think they vary. And the people who are just about executing, we don't necessarily stay together as client and coach. And the ones who are sort of more interested in the whole, and they're, whether they're working in a team or whether they're starting their own business, and they've got a more of a balanced view, that's sort of where I'm much more interested in that, because I think then that does probably translate to a business. And I think what I've become good at and what that then gives you is more chance of longevity. So it might be more than, if that makes sense. So you've got less of the hockey stick, but you build something smaller but much more sustainable.
And for me, that I lean towards the latter, because I've seen what retirement or the end of the working kind of life that it does to people. And I'm from what I've seen, from my own experience, what I've seen with my father and my mother too, is that when that work ended, their lack of purpose ended as well. And it became something that was very detrimental to their lifestyle. Yeah. And that brings us on to this big word, purpose. I know it's something that, since we've known each other, and the gathering that you had, there was a lot of talk around purpose. And I'm interested now to know that when was it that you started to get those little kind of feelings in your tummy that, you know, your company, maybe it wasn't fulfilling your purpose, and you started to have these feelings, niggles that drove you on to becoming a coach, and then now starting Campfire?
Yeah, I think it's quite a nuanced question, that. I think that my retreating from Fantasy League was when actually there wasn't much scope for creativity or creating anything new, and it was very operational, very technical, very pressured, and it just felt like there was no new or fresh ideas or air in the business. So I got to a point where I thought I just need to, you know, find that again, because that's what was the fuel really for years. And I think I sort of took this sort of step back, and it, you know, it's been an ongoing process over a few years now of transition, of thinking, well, what is it that excites me, you know, maybe over the years, but also now. And I think that, you know, what I've landed on is where I am now, which is I'm really interested in people's stories and people's journeys, and, you know, sharing what I've learned and how I can help people to sort of connect with it. You know, I think I have this phrase that I use a lot, which is sort of finding the gold. And I think that the gold in the person, the talents, the excitement, the values, the mission, is as important as in a business. And often, if you can align those two things, then you're really, you know, then there's a very strong synergy and catalyst for growth and creativity. And I think that's what I had for a good period of time with Fantasy League, and then, you know, one or both tends to fizzle out. So I think that if what I'm talking about is that I think where I looked, what I saw was that I think I'm really interested in helping people to find that gold within them, whether, you know, they're in a sort of a middle management job or creating the next, you know, most exciting product. It doesn't actually matter. I think it's about the journey to align what you're really about, what you get excited about with your work, and then the work just flies and you fly with it. And you know, that work can sometimes be about looking at the business and saying, well, has the business lost its, you know, alignment? So what I came through that process was saying, this isn't, you know, I'm not interested in problem solving or technical, you know, the technical side of the business. You know, I was, I guess, a bit of a techie to start with, and it's not really what interests me now, but it's maybe never what I was good at. It was about working with people, developing people, and creating new ideas, which is so the coaching is really addressing that people and journey side of things, helping people to really tap into what matters and what's golden within them. And Campfire has kept the sort of creative entrepreneurial muscles alive as well. And as much as possible, I'm sort of trying to weave the two together and think about how can Campfire work on that personal side, maybe in groups or as a community, so that, you know, it really fully embraces what I think I'm most interested in, and hopefully have, you know, value to offer to others. So it's gravitating more towards that feeling of excitement, I suppose, is, you know, where that journey away from Fantasy League, because it just felt like just propping up an old idea, and it's like, well, there's no ideas in here, there's no creativity in here, it's just keeping something ticking along for the sake of it. And actually, just the last point, I've now come back to, when I do look at Fantasy League, because I'm still involved in it, I'm looking at it with much more fresh and creative eyes. So I think that you can go away and get that from other places, and then you might be able to bring it back to an old problem or an old area. So it's just about sort of, yeah, working those muscles. I don't know if that's quite clear or quite answered the question, but
you know, when I first met you, I was like, oh, this is a wise guy. You know, he's got gray hair and glasses. And I'm wondering, I'm just want to get a little personal, I suppose, about when you started to look in the mirror, and when did age maybe start coming into the factor of, like, you know, I've been in Fantasy League getting a little bit older, am I really helping people the way I can be helping them? I suppose because we just don't have as much time left.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely part of it too. And there's a sense of, carrying on doing the same thing because it's familiar and because you're scared of doing something else, or actually thinking, well, you know what, maybe I now have more to offer others. And this isn't about sort of ego and creating new things or building a business. It's more about actually, allowing me to help people, give something back to people who, might benefit from something I can offer. And I think there's something for me just very important about bringing people together and letting people sort of connect and inspire one another. And I think we all have a lot of wisdom. You talk about age and wisdom, yes, maybe, but I think we all do it at every age. And I think you get different people in the room, and there's a lot of wisdom that goes in unusual and not unpredictable ways. But yes, I think sort of purpose and meaning feels like something that maybe does build with age, and I guess you've got less to prove to yourself. There's this movement from sort of ego to self in a Jungian idea of, the first half of adulthood being about sort of establishing yourself, reputation, money, building things, and then the second half is like, okay, but what matters to me and what can I give to the world? And that's the journey. And I think there's still a tension. There's absolutely always that tension between ego and meaning. I think it continues, or certainly for me, the ego is still fighting its corner.
Yeah. So what does ego mean to you? Like, is that all of the wants and the needs of what Andrew thinks he needs to be successful?
Yeah, I think there's the proving that you're smart or creative, or proving things to yourself. And it's like, well, first of all, don't you know this? And second of all, what about what you have to offer others? Isn't that more important than what you have to offer yourself? You should be self-sufficient enough, really. I think, yeah, it's just around I think ego comes from can come from a lack of contentment. I've got to prove something. I've got to, keep feeding this thing. And it's like, well, surely it's fed enough. At what point will it not still be hungry and not still be needed to be proved something, or to be, in some way settled,
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, when do you have enough? When can you just say, yes, I have enough, I've done enough?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I ask myself that quite a bit, and I kind of go back into what is the enough? Is it money? Is it cars? Is it, what is the enough? Yeah, I'll be asking myself that for a little while. But where, with regards to the coaching, what avenues were you looking at in terms of how you could qualify yourself? What were your targets? Was it men? Was it corporations? Who in the beginning, who did you want to start to work with?
Well, I sort of, I guess the training I chose in the end was executive coaching, because I felt like it would keep the door open for more corporate work. And although I've not done masses of corporate work, I think I'd probably be, fairly effective there. And I suppose I'm more in this sort of whole person coaching. So life coaching sometimes has a bad ring to it, but maybe I am closer to a life coach than an executive coach. But I think, my style does vary. I can be quite organized, rational, task driven with some people, and other people it's way more exploratory and psychological. And I think obviously with any one person, the coaching program might move from one to the other. Yeah, I think I've probably been lent towards not necessarily men, but I think that the thing that is probably the hot area for me is people in some form of transition. So where they're having to get to know themselves, ask themselves these questions about ego and meaning and success. And I find that, I think somebody very wise said to me, you're very useful to your clients when you're only a little way ahead of them. If you can't engage with where they are, or if you feel completely resolved, that's not necessarily as valuable as if you're slightly struggling through the same stuff, but you might be 3 or 4 steps down the path ahead of them. You don't want to be at the same point as them, because then it's a nice chat with a friend. But I think you need to have some level of knowledge and experience that can help them, but you need to still be feeling that pain yourself. So I think there's no surprises that we often choose the clients that relate closely to what we have been through or we're still going through.
Well, it's funny, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about the word mentor. And I since I've looked it up and I tried to see the origins, but and it kind of I found some on the description of what this gentleman said it was, but he was describing the mentor as the old sailor, the old sailor who'd been beaten and scarred, almost drowned, and he's the old sailor trying to help the young sailors, saying, make sure you don't grab that rope, because if you do, you're going to burn your hands. Make sure you duck, otherwise you're going to get hit by that boom, etc. How important is it for you? Like, do you have a mentor as well? I think this is the thing that I'm interested to know. Do coaches have coaches?
Yes, I have had a coach for quite some time. We're on a pause right now. But I think I'm probably inspired now by, there's a couple of people who I read and I listen to a lot, who are, I suppose, mentors at a distance. They wouldn't know it, but they're certainly inspirations to me. One of them is, I was talking about the Jungian side of things, is a psychotherapist analyst, Jungian analyst called James Hollis, who's written a lot. There's quite a few audiobooks. There's some interviews on podcasts with him. So he's an American. He must be in his 80s now. In fact, the other mentor is probably similar age. Somebody called Michael Mead, who talks quite a lot around mentoring, and he works a lot with myth and with youth and with mentoring, and he uses a lot around myth and stories to inform development, both on an individual basis, but also I think on a societal basis. And he brings a lot back to simple sort of myths and timeless journeys, and a lot of tribal wisdom. And there's a lot of richness in his work, and I find him really inspiring. And you reminded me of him when you were talking about mentoring, because I think he has a course and a series on specifically on mentoring, and he's really engaging, really funny, and very accessible, actually. So I recommend anyone to check both of them out if you can.
I definitely will. As you were describing, it reminded me like kind of Joseph Campbell.
Yes, exactly.
And you know what, Andrew? The thing that I love about these teachings is it's the simple stuff. Like I think that we can be confused so much by different protocols and different terminology and languages that can be, and acronyms, and that can confuse people, when really it's a simple thing of communication and community. And I love the fact that you're bringing it right back to that with Campfire. And I'm wondering, I suppose, have you seen that in your where we can confuse things so much with analysis and really deep dives, when really there is just this simple formula, I suppose, of a journey that we're all on. We all need to go on it. And along the way, we're going to need support. We're going to need someone to hold our hands. We're going to need to be alone for some time. It's just that hero's journey. So I suppose it's just the simplification of this protocol that us humans are going through. Yeah.
I think that's right. I think we, I think there's these I think these sort of touch points, compass points almost, around, we all have this gold that we've, been touching on. We all had our sort of shadows or our wounds. We all have a deep need for connection. We self-sabotage. And I think that the more we can understand that everyone shares these challenges and these assets, I suppose, and we can compare our lives, share experiences, share ideas with one another, we can realize that A, we're not alone, and B, there's a real richness, not just in learning from one another, but actually connecting from one another. I think we are really programmed to be connected. And personally, being the age and the generation that I am, I feel like that's much, much best done face to face than through screens or social media. But I know there is a place for that. But I think that we are, as beings, we want to see each other. We want to be in the room together. We want to feel, that sort of connection that you have in a physical space a lot of the time. And when that works, as we all know, when it works, you just feel enlivened and inspired by it and supported by it. And I think we can all in our lives, based partly because of our lifestyles, but partly just because life is hard, we can all sometimes go days or weeks or even months without that. And when you get it, it's like a glass of water in the desert, and you're like, okay, I remember once again, I need to connect, I need to share, I need to listen, the basic stuff.
And I think that's when I was first introduced to you and went through your website and you have Campfire. I have a company called Retribe. I think that so aligned in a lot of the messaging of kind of going back to how we evolved as humans. When did you start to kind of be interested in our human evolution and the fact that we evolved the way we are in tribes with community, with people who were around us face to face, who we were contributing, to the growth of the tribe. We weren't taking away from the tribe. When did that start interesting you, and how did Campfire evolve?
I think it's been a combination of things. As I said, it's been sort of reading a little bit around Jungian ideas. Certainly some of it has been, listening to and reading stuff from Michael Mead, who talks a lot about indigenous tribes and customs and how they work. I've become quite engaged with Mankind, which is men's groups, and they do a lot around initiation and ritual and circles. And although that may be, not for everyone, in its simple form, it's emphasizing these points that we've been talking about. And I think that as I think you and many people might understand, is you're just you walk into a sphere where there are different things, you're reading things, you're seeing things in a particular way, you're maybe joining things, and all of it is leaning in a particular direction. And I think that's how Campfire evolved. It was just, this is the sort of stuff that is now interesting me. I think there's a real power in bringing people together. I like some elements of what rituals can bring, whether that's an overt ritual or actually just the idea of getting people together and the containment of that. But in any event, I think it just allows for that slowness of conversation, engagement of conversation, letting things evolve, which is, I guess, the idea of a campfire, is it sort of burns slowly. There's, to some extent, there's transformation happening as the wood burns to, becomes charred and smoky and glowing. There's sort of transformation happening there. And I think the other sort of really nice idea about a campfire is often it's dimly lit. And I think when things are dimly lit, people are more able to maybe show themselves because there isn't the intimacy of a glaring light or a sort of very full-on eye contact. So the people can be a little bit more candid. So it's quite subtle, really, I suppose, the answer to that question. And again, I don't know how clear it is, but it's just about moving in an area where there were these different influences, and it started to sort of condense towards a way of bringing people together, which, as I say, is still evolving.
Yeah, I'm interested to know what you've learned about it so far, and that, like, what's it like holding these? Have you held these events in the corporate environment? I'm very interested to know, when a group of people in a company get together, how vulnerable they're willing to be, knowing that if they express something, it might be used against them.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I've done, I was doing quite a bit of that actually, understandably on Zoom, especially when people started to come back after COVID, and it was very powerful, and people went very deep very quickly, and there was a real need for people. I just lit a tiny flame, and the whole thing burst into flames. Really, with a small invitation, people were telling stories about childhood and really painful stuff in a room, a small room, let's say, of half a dozen colleagues, where people would turn around and say, "I never knew that about you. I've worked with you for 5 years. I never knew that about you." And it was really powerful. And some of the feedback I got was, "Yeah, we don't exactly know where to use this because it's really strong. Actually, maybe it's more than we bargained for." So I think some of that work now is in, okay, what's the focus of this and what's the purpose of this? Because if it opens up in too much of an uncontained way, it's really meaningful and there can be some really deep connections. But actually, let's be careful. So what that tells me is there's a real need for this. There's a real appetite for this. But what I'm now learning is, okay, so is this in the context of a leadership, or is this in the context of, how can we bring this in to make it feel like it's contained within some sphere of need for the business or the organization? Because otherwise it is a bit, it's like a flame just going in the wind. It could go anywhere. I don't know if that relates to your experience too.
Yeah, it does a bit. I think that, a lot of people, well, it depends which community, if it's a corporate community or recovery community or a sports organization,
Yes.
you do get, different levels of vulnerability, and whether or not there are senior leaders in the room or or bosses or, folks are just there with no one to hold them accountable to anything. So, but definitely the sharing aspect is very inspirational. Like, some people have just opened up in beautiful ways. And I think in that, as the facilitator, you can step back and you say, what you've created are some bonds of connection that are going to stay when this event has left. And I think that is what the true value comes from. And I think that's where, say, a corporation would benefit more than they would even know. But now that we're coming into this new work environment where working from home wasn't really as much a detriment to a lot of corporations that they thought it was going to be. Financially, in many cases, it was more beneficial to have people working from home, not really considering the health implications, the mental well-being of people. So I think you have a lot of people who are going, we're going to actually give people the opportunity to work from home because it's cost effective, not knowing the long-term implications of people working in isolation. But then there are still the other people who want people to go to work because they've signed a 25-year lease on a building. So they want to make sure that they've got bums on seats there. So there's this kind of going to be this over the next few years, this balancing act of making sure people have human connection and be safe while working from home. I know everyone uses the word hybrid and it does make sense to me, but to me, it's just the not knowing of over the next couple of years of how people are going to be working in this environment that you and I are discussing, but also in this human need, millions of years of evolution, well, say tens of thousands of years of human evolution of being connected to a fellow human being, unless you were shunned, and excommunicated into the wilderness. But and I don't think anybody really knows the answers. I think you're fighting human evolution, but you're also fighting, where we come from to where we're going. So I don't want to say that, working from home is going to be, this huge burden on people. I think it's going to be something that we evolve with over the next few years to come.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. It's a very, it's really in a state of flux, the way the work and the communication and the relationships work between colleagues. And I think a lot of companies obviously are still figuring this out. And as you say, there'll be different needs, but I think that there needs to be people like us need to find a way of bringing this into businesses so that it can be used as a way of, knitting the team together and keeping people from, falling into these sort of mental health challenges that you're absolutely right are going to emerge. And it's a slow burn, it may be seeing some benefits now, but what seeds are being sown for 6 months and 12 months, and, down the line. So
where's Campfire now? And I know you said at the beginning that you're just kind of letting it flow. But do you have a kind of a heart space for it, of where you would like to see it over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a fairly clear idea of where I want to see it go, and I think it's the getting from there to there is perhaps quite nuts and bolts and not the stuff we particularly need to talk about. So it's much more interesting about where I want to see it. So yeah, I mean, I'm envisaging it as a community that people can come to, join up to, where they can join regular conversations that'll be open to the community, and they'll be topic led around things that I think will have a wide enough appeal that people can come from different backgrounds to talk about and to share, and then where people want to work deeper, there'll be workshops and groups that will form around particular life situations, around particular topics, around particular challenges, where you might work in a group of 6 or so for 3, 4, 5 months on a more of a held program or a pod. And then obviously one-to-one as well. So it's something where you can work more deeply, but you're part of a whole where there are, ability to connect with people through these conversations, and then go off, meet, collaborate, do whatever you want to do. So it's a sort of a community of conversation and growth. Sorry, 1 second. I'm just going to get.
No worries.
Yeah, sort of conversation and growth community, and I think to some extent, and this is where I don't want to sound too vague, but I think to some extent I can see it evolving the way the community needs it to evolve. So there might be some areas that are very much member led, and people are interested in doing something. There might be some activism within it. I really hope that there'll be a special purpose within it around things that people are interested in, and maybe joining up in groups and building. But at its heart, I think it's, as I said, conversations, connection, growth, exploration, both on a sort of an open group basis, or basis of working in a smaller group in a more focused way. But at its heart, it's just around bringing people together and connecting and sharing ideas.
I think it's a beautiful, I want to say purpose, I guess. It keeps coming out. I think it's amazing that you found, that need to be able to provide these spaces for people, because, ultimately, Andrew, I'm like you. I think that that's where healing will happen. I think that's where you'll hold people who are going through these transformations, whether they be trauma related, age related, just time in your life related, that people are going through these transitions. And I think a lot of people are wondering why. A lot of people are wondering why they're feeling a little bit uncomfortable in the work that they're in, or in the relationships that they're in, or in the educations that they're in, because I think a lot of people are questioning, purpose, or this feeling of this kind of awakening that, we need to be connected. We need to be part of mankind, humankind, and again, hold each other's hands while we go through this time on this planet in 2022. And I think I know it's always been needed, but it's needed now. So I love what you're doing.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I have a hard time sometimes describing it, and I think people either sort of tend to get it or don't get it. A lot of people say, yeah, but that sounds very open-ended. And I'm like, yeah, at the moment it is open-ended. We need to start building the groups, building the conversations, and then in time it will be more clear what it is. I can, in my mind's eye, most of the time really visualize it very, very clearly, but it's just starting to do it and starting to get people to. So watch this space. As I said to you earlier, where I am right now is, I had thought about this as something just for men, and I think there is obviously a subset of it that might be just for men, but I'm now thinking, for me, that's not the singular drive. I get that. I think mankind do that superbly, and I think there will be a part of it that will be for men in the same way as there might be a part of it that might be for new parents or for grads or whatever it might be. But I think why limit yourself? And I'm not so focused only on male issues. I think there's a lot of people who are fully driven on that and fully, you know, really fantastically effective in that sphere. What this is about is actually the mixed group in the room, you know, ages, genders, perspectives. And I think that's in a way the richness, that somebody who's 25 can help someone who's 55 as much as the other way around. And it's that randomness of it, which makes it harder to from a targeting, launching, you know, who's it for, what's the problem it's solving point of view. And I think that to some extent, I need to just say, you know, trust my instinct on this and not do it through the textbook way and just start running things and see how it happens. I'm certainly clear that when I ran Fantasy League, I didn't have any idea about any of this. I didn't know what a value proposition was or a target audience or anything. I just thought this is good. If I package it in this way, it's quite interesting. And the people who found it. So, you know, you can sometimes be have too much information, too much experience, too many experts. But I think if you lean into something, you know, with a really sort of heartfelt creativity, I think it can work. I really believe that. It will work.
It will work. Andrew, just like that, our time has come to an end. So thank you so much for joining us today. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, the simplest thing is to go to the website, campfire.cc, and my address is on there, or they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not big on other social media, but if you look me up on LinkedIn, Andrew Wainstein, or if you just go to campfire.cc, then there's bits around the groups and the coaching and my personal details. But I really, really enjoyed this, Nick, and thank you for steering it in a way that took it into, you know, unusual and you know, unexpected areas. So it's been very stimulating for me too.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us. And when I'm back next week, I'll ping you an email and let's arrange a coffee at the house.
Definitely.
Okay. All right.
Nice to speak
the
to
House
you.
of St. Barnabas. Yeah. All right. Take it easy. Thanks everybody for joining us. See you next week. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye-bye.